Welcome everybody to the seasonal diet, eating what our ancestors ate when they ate it, like we were evolved to do. Quinoa, continuing Grain Week and getting into the grains from different places in the world. Today we are speaking about quinoa. Before about 10 years ago, when Whole Foods and hipsters came into existence, nobody had ever heard of quinoa, in the West at least, but it's actually a very ancient food with an interesting history. Quinoa is originally native to the mountainous areas of South America in Peru and Bolivia. It was first cultivated by humans from about 5, maybe up to 7,000 years ago, we think, but of course they could have eaten wild versions of quinoa before then. It grew a little bit, definitely, in the surrounding areas and countries of South America, but it does not really grow a lot outside of its native lands in Bolivia and Peru. Even by the time the Spanish settlers came there in the 1500s, they noted that other parts of South America grew more corn, whereas the mountainous indigenous regions and the populations in Peru and Bolivia, they were eating more of the quinoa. The Europeans even tried to bring the quinoa seeds back to Europe, but it was largely unsuccessful over the hundreds of years at growing, so it is definitely ideal for the climate of Peru and Bolivia. And quinoa was actually almost extinct when the Spanish settlers came there. They burned down the fields and fields of quinoa in order to control the food supply and population, like they did many other places in the Americas. So quinoa only really grew on the remote mountain areas and small secluded areas for hundreds of years, and it stayed relatively hidden and unnoticed for all this time. That lasted all the way up until about 50 years ago when the West rediscovered it. A Bolivian mystic was teaching his students there to eat quinoa for help with meditation and spirituality. A couple Americans and some spiritual tourism trips to Bolivia learned from this spiritual leader, and they were the ones responsible for reintroducing quinoa to the West, and they brought it to the United States in the 70s and 80s, and since then it has just grown in popularity, and new technology has enabled it to be grown in other places in the world that wouldn't normally be successful. So of course it grows best in a moderate climate and mountainous regions just like Peru and Bolivia. Quinoa is typically planted in the spring and can be harvested anywhere from 3 to 6 months after planting, so that makes it in top season from the midsummer to the fall. But like the other grains, it can be harvested and preserved for a very long time, making it available all winter. Just remember though, quinoa is native to Bolivia and Peru, which are right on the equator, and there is not a lot of difference in the seasons right there. So you would most likely not be able to grow it where you are living today in the same way. Do I like quinoa? No, I really don't. It's not in most of our ancestral diets unless you are from the mountains of South America. Yeah, sure, I know quinoa is one of the healthiest grains, so that's a great thing. I just don't like it. I don't even think it tastes good, and none of my ancestors ever ate that previously in history, before they discovered Whole Foods, that is. But hey, that's just me. How about you guys? Do you like it? Do you have any special recipes? Do you eat it at certain times of year? Let us all know.